Hello everyone, this is Marco and welcome back to my channel. I suspect that you already knew this was coming. In today's video, I'm actually going to modify the Strike and Roar Giganotosaurus by Mattel. Now, I was inspired by Nathan Vader, who has modified his Giga. So generally, us collectors really don't like the action feature that comes with this Giganotosaurus toy, because it isn't posable and it just stays floppy all the time. So Nathan Vader's idea was to turn it into a posable figure by removing all the insides and replacing them with an articulated joint. He's also gone ahead and completely repainted the figure too. Yeah, he completely repainted it and made it look gorgeous by making it look more film accurate and a bit more realistic. But I'm going to take things a little bit differently. I'm going to make the torso posable like he did, but I am going to modify the head as well. Actually, having said that, Nathan Vader did modify the head too, but I'm going to take it a step further and paint the tail on the figure because the paint on the tail in this is pretty bad. So the modifications I'm going to do on the head is I'm going to make the head a bit more narrow. For some reason, Mattel made the mouth really wide. It looks like the Indominus Rex, and the teeth interlock in this toy as well, which isn't much of a thing with the Giganotosaurus from Jurassic World Dominion. Its top teeth actually overlap the bottom ones. I'm going to retexture the top of the head too. I want to preserve the jaw action feature. I want it to open and close by pressing the button. So my plan is to cut through the seam lines, these ones right here that go down the middle of the body, and take the two halves of the figure apart. This isn't an easy task because this toy, unlike the Hasbro toys, isn't fastened or held together with screws. So I'm going to have to cut through the glue and through the molded plastic right here along the seam line and then pry it open with some tools. I will show you how I did that. This is pretty advanced stuff, and if you're a kid, please do not attempt this at all. So I used the Stanley knife and I squeezed it into the seam lines and cut through these parts here that held it together. These parts are actually glued in, so the only way to take it apart is to cut through it. And then I pried it open with a butter knife and other tools too. I completely removed the speaker and the sound system and all of that because I don't like my toys to make sounds, so that's just a personal preference. But as you can see, taking this half off of the figure, this is all the action features inside, and it's pretty complicated stuff. Like, Mattel put a lot of effort into an action feature that no one really likes that much. Personally, I think they could have put the budget of making that action feature into other parts of the figure, like the paint apps and the head sculpt and whatever. But anyway, let's take this stuff out. I'm using a screwdriver here to take this part out. The chomping action feature is connected to the button through that wire that you can see right there, sort of dangling about. So for this side of the figure, we're left with this. I'm going to remove all the wires and all of that. I've also decided to cut through the seam lines of this part of the figure too, so it would help me remove the inside action feature part. It's just to be able to pry it open a bit and release the features out. Also, you can see the wire that connects the jaw articulation. Yeah, I removed that from the action feature bit that it was passing through. So now it's time to add the jointed articulation. This is called a third hand, and it is generally used to hold on to things while you're working on as like an extra pair of hands, which is why it's called third hand. It works in the same way as a doll armature. It's just an array of ball joints and sockets and allow your stuff to articulate and be posed. I found mine on Amazon, I believe, and I'm not just going to use that. I'm going to put aluminium armature wire inside and twist it at the end. So this blue plastic cannot be super glued. It's just the type of plastic that cannot be glued. So by twisting the aluminium wire around it and tightening it up, it will actually give me a way of gluing it down or holding it down into the figure itself. I'm going to glue it down by using Milliput, which is perfect for this kind of stuff, and then I positioned it inside of the front part of the torso and then inside the second half too. I should probably mention that my Giga toy was actually faulty. I noticed the right leg was a bit loose, and just by using it as a normal toy, by posing the leg backwards and forwards, it came off. I decided not to include it in the video because in this video I just wanted to concentrate on the posability and action feature aspect of this toy. The screw that attaches the leg to the articulation has the tiniest threads, and that's a downside in Mattel's design. Then I just closed everything up by super gluing it together, and that's pretty much it. Now this toy is completely posable at the torso. It can be moved up and down and twisted in all directions. I would like to note that the button at the top of the toy has been super glued now and is completely solid and flush with the rest of the figure. The jaw chomping action or roaring action, whatever you'd like to call it, works beautifully because I just put everything back in its place. That whole section of the toy is completely untouched and it works beautifully. So if you want, you can just stop here if you don't want to modify it more, but I decided to go the extra mile and narrow the face down. So by doing that, I would be using a heat gun. The teeth are rubber. If I used the heat gun, the teeth would just melt. So I decided to cut the teeth out, which was a good idea because there wouldn't be space for the teeth anyway. I'll show you what I did with the teeth later on. Now you're gonna see a really cursed Giga. There it is. It's a gummy Giga. It's completely devoid of teeth and it looks like a Muppet. I love it. I removed every single row of teeth from the toy and it looks like a grandpa Giga. I used a heat gun on the bottom jaw to soften the plastic up and it would become malleable enough for me to squeeze it with some heat resistant gloves and make the jaw a lot narrower. It took a few attempts to make it look natural and symmetrical, but I think I got it in the end. I also did it on the top jaw too. I'm really happy with it because once it's got its teeth back in, it will not look as derpy as it did before. I just cut every single individual tooth from the row of teeth and glued each tooth back in its correct spot. And I must say this looks so much better. Next is the texture on the top of the head. As you can see, there's pretty much no texture there and it's really frustrating. So I decided to score some scales in with my scalpel and it actually worked really well. I didn't think it would, but once I scored the scales in, I just used the heat gun a bit to soften the score lines a bit by melting the plastic. It really softens the sharp edges of the score lines and it looks and feels so much better if I say so myself. So this method can actually be used on other figures if you want. It's obviously not a very easy task, but if there's some missing textures on some of your most beloved figures, you can actually sculpt them back in like this, which is something that I will probably do in the future to some other figures I have or some upcoming figures if they don't have enough detail on them. I just had an idea. It would probably work really well with the belly texture on the T-Rex, because we all know that the T-Rex has got some really cool crocodilian looking scales under its tummy, and Mattel always forgets about that. So this is what it looks like. It looks so much better and I'm really happy with it. Let's move on to the paint. I decided to cover up the seams with the belly paint that Mattel gave it. I decided to make it run a bit longer down the underneath of the figure, and then I'm painting back the darker patterns. I decided to add it on the top of the head too, because the figure would really benefit from that, and the Giga from the film has actually got the patterns on the head too, so Mattel forgot about that too. I'm pretty happy with how I managed to color match the colors. Color matching is quite hard and I think I nailed it this time, so I'm really happy about that. And then I painted the rest of the patterns on the tail. Man, it really makes such a difference. It looks so much better with more paint on the tail instead of those just two sort of blotchy marks that it had before. I think every Mattel figure would benefit with more paint on the tail. They do it to cut costs, but I think they should really just go for it and paint the rest of the figure. Anyway, this is it finished. I am really happy with it. I didn't think it would look so much different on the face, but narrowing the snout down and making the teeth overlap over the bottom ones really does help. It really does make it look much, much more like the one in the film. It's not perfect, but it's so much closer. The paint on the top of the head really sort of blends everything in very nicely together, and I couldn't be happier with it and with how it looks. Unfortunately, you know, again, I'm still a bit upset about that leg. It's still a bit loose. I'll see if I can get that to work a bit better in the future. Having said that, I really like this figure still, and please let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Tell me if you're going to do this mod too. Big thanks again to Nathy Vader for inspiring this video, and thanks so much for watching. I would like to give a massive thank you to all of my Patreons. Seriously guys, your support really does mean the world to me, as it helps me do what I love for you. You help me buy materials, and most of all, you give me a helping hand with improving the quality of the content of my videos. Even if it's just a small donation, every little helps.